You can't stop us. We have authority here.
Your authority ends here. Back off!
She's FBI.
The HOA Hustle, a tale of fake cops and a hidden hero. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon in our sleepy suburban neighborhood, the kind of place where the biggest scandal is someone leaving their trash cans out past pickup day. I'm Henry, a 52-year-old high school history teacher with a side gig fixing security systems. My life is predictable, and I like it that way. My wife, Ellen, 55, is the picture of calm spending her days tending to her rose garden or lost in a mystery novel. She's retired from some vague government job she rarely mentions, and I've always known her as the gentle soul who hums while watering her flowers. But that afternoon, 3 strangers in shiny badges showed up at our door, claiming to be HOA enforcers, and everything I thought I knew about my wife unraveled in ways I'll never forget. The pounding on our front door was so loud it rattled the windows. Not a polite knock, more like someone trying to break in. I was at the kitchen table, grading papers on the Bill of Rights, while Ellen, still in her running gear from her daily 3-mile jog, grabbed a glass of water. We exchanged a glance, the kind married couples share when something feels off. Ellen reached the door first, and I stayed back, figuring she'd handle whatever it was. Looking back, I wonder why I didn't insist on answering myself. Maybe deep down, I already sensed Ellen was more capable than I gave her credit for. When she opened the door, 3 men stood on our porch, dressed in crisp uniforms with badges that gleamed under the Georgia sun. The leader, a guy with a name tag reading Carl, had the swagger of a mall cop who'd watched too many action movies. His voice boomed with fake authority. "Ma'am, we're HOA enforcement officers. We're here for a mandatory property inspection. You can let us in, or we'll make this difficult." His 2 sidekicks loomed behind him, trying to look tough. Ellen didn't flinch. "I'm sorry, but you must be mistaken," she said, her voice polite but firm, like she was explaining something to a confused student. "Our property isn't part of any HOA. I can show you the deed if you'd like." Her calm was unnerving, like she was studying them rather than reacting. Carl wasn't having it. He stepped closer, his voice rising. "We have legal authority in this neighborhood, ma'am. Cooperate, or we'll escalate this." I felt my pulse quicken. Should I grab my phone? Call the police? But Ellen stood her ground, unruffled, as if these 3 wannabe cops were just a minor inconvenience. Then Carl made a fatal mistake. He stepped onto our property, his boots crossing the threshold of our porch. "We're coming in, whether you like it or not," he said, a smug grin spreading across his face. "We've got reports of violations, and we're authorized to search." His buddies moved closer, their hands twitching like they were ready for a fight. In a flash, Ellen's demeanor shifted. It was subtly slight tilt of her head, a tightening of her stance, but I saw it. Before Carl could finish his threat, Ellen grabbed his wrist, twisted it with surgical precision, and stepped aside as he stumbled. The second guy lunged, only to double over from a swift knee to his gut. The third froze, just long enough for Ellen to sweep his legs out from under him. In seconds, all 3 were on the ground, groaning in a heap. I blinked, unsure if I'd imagined it. My wife, the woman who spent her mornings pruning roses, had just taken down 3 grown men like they were props in a movie. Ellen pulled out her phone and dialed 911, her voice as steady as if she were ordering coffee. "I need to report 3 individuals impersonating law enforcement and attempting to enter a private residence." I stood there, jaw slack, as she gave our address with the calm of someone who'd done this before. Who was this woman I'd been married to for 7 years? The Real police arrived within minutes, 2 officers who looked far more professional than Carl's crew. The older one, a grizzled man in his late 50s with sharp eyes, approached cautiously, taking in the scene. 3 men on the ground, Ellen standing calmly by the door. Carl, clutching his wrist, tried to spin the story. "Officer, this woman assaulted us while we were performing official HOA duties." He waved his fake badge like it meant something. I braced myself, worried we might both end up in handcuffs. But the older officer studied Ellen, his eyes narrowing. "Ma'am, do you have any law enforcement background?" "Something about how you handled this," he trailed off, waiting. Ellen reached into her purse and pulled out a leather wallet I'd never seen before. She opened it, showing him something that made his posture shift instantly. He straightened, his tone turning respectful. "We'll handle this, ma'am. These gentlemen are coming with us for questioning. As they cuffed Carl and his buddies, I caught snippets of their conversation. Former federal agent. The officer muttered to his partner. FBI background. These idiots had no idea who they were messing with. Carl's face went pale, his tough guy act crumbling as he stammered. FBI? She. System, she's FBI? His voice cracked as they loaded him into the squad car. I stood frozen, my mind reeling. Ellen, my Ellen, was a former FBI agent? After the police left, she turned to me, her face unreadable. We need to talk, Henry. But before she could say more, the phone rang. She answered, putting it on speaker. A cold voice came through Patricia from the Willow Creek HOA. I heard about today's incident, she said, her tone dripping with menace. Gary mentioned your wife's background. This complicates things. Ellen's eyes narrowed. What exactly did Gary tell you, Patricia? Her voice had an edge I'd never heard before. There was a long pause before Patricia replied. He mentioned federal connections. Former law enforcement, perhaps. We'll see how far those connections reach. The call ended, and Ellen stared at the phone, her expression hard. Tomorrow's going to be interesting, she said, and I felt a chill. For the first time, I wondered if I truly knew my wife. The next morning, an official-looking envelope appeared in our mailbox. No stamp, no postmark, just hand-delivered. Inside was an HOA violation notice claiming our grass was too long, threatening a $50 fine. I'd mowed 2 days ago, measuring the height to the inch. This is harassment, I fumed, pacing the kitchen. Ellen read the notice and laughed a sharp, knowing sound. Classic intimidation tactic, she said. They drown you in bureaucracy until you give in. Over the next 3 days, more notices arrived, each more absurd than the last. Our driveway parking was unauthorized. Our curtains were the wrong color. Ellen's prize roses weren't approved. I was livid, but Ellen grew quieter, her eyes cold and calculating. By the 4th notice, she disappeared into her office, emerging with a stack of old county records and boundary maps. Henry, get me every document we have on this house, she said, her voice carrying an authority I didn't recognize. I dug through our files while she made calls, speaking in clipped, professional tones I'd never heard. The records confirmed our suspicions. Our house was 3 blocks outside the HOA's jurisdiction. Ellen found altered boundary maps in the HOA's filings, evidence they'd been illegally expanding their control. They picked the wrong house, she said, her voice like steel. Ellen announced she was attending the next HOA meeting, and I watched her transform. The gardening clothes were gone, replaced by a sharp business suit. She practiced her presentation in the bathroom mirror, her voice commanding, her movements precise. This is how you control a hostile room, she told me, catching my stare. Never let them see uncertainty. The community center was packed with neighbors, the air buzzing with anticipation. Patricia, the HOA president, sat at the front table, her smile smug as she launched into a speech about problematic residents who defied community standards. Her eyes locked on Ellen, the threat clear. But Ellen sat silently, taking notes, waiting for her moment. When the public comment period opened, Ellen stood, placing an original county property map on the table with a thud. The room fell silent. She presented unaltered boundary maps, public records, and proof of the HOA's illegal expansion, her voice calm but cutting. Patricia's smugness vanished, her hands trembling as Ellen laid out the evidence like a prosecutor. These documents are available to any citizen who knows where to look, Ellen said, her tone almost instructional. An elderly man stood, his voice shaky. They did this to my family 2 years ago, forced us to join or face legal action. Others spoke up, sharing stories of fake fines and threats. The room erupted, neighbors pulling out phones to record. Patricia, desperate, ordered security to remove Ellen, claiming the meeting was for HOA members only. Ellen didn't blink. State law requires these meetings to be open to all affected residents. Shall I cite the statute? Patricia stormed out, hissing, "You have no idea who you're dealing with, lady." A week later, I was called to the principal's office at school. 3 parents had filed complaints, accusing me of teaching anti-authority propaganda. The timing was no coincidence. All lived within Patricia's HOA. The complaints were identical, clearly scripted. My principal, Mr. Thompson, looked embarrassed. "We have to investigate, Henry. They're threatening the school board. I was suspended pending review. When I told Ellen, she sat motionless, gripping her coffee mug until her knuckles whitened. They made this personal, she said, her voice deadly calm. That was their biggest mistake. She disappeared into her office, the air heavy with tension. Through the door, I heard her making calls, using terms like federal oversight and civil rights harassment. She emerged with a federal complaint against Patricia, detailing dates, witnesses, and legal precedents. It was a masterpiece, like something a law firm would take months to produce. This isn't just about us, she said, showing me a chart mapping 6 other families targeted by the HOA. This is systematic fraud. She made one last call, her voice chilling. It's Ellen. Remember that old HOA corruption case? I found another one. They made it personal. She smiled a predator's smile. They have no idea what they're in for. Unmarked government sedans appeared in the neighborhood, agents in suits blending in as they gathered evidence. Patricia, oblivious, bragged at the grocery store that Ellen was just a retired desk worker who didn't scare her. Carl, out on bail, was paranoid, whispering about Ellen's takedown of his crew. She's different, he muttered, but Patricia dismissed him. I've handled troublemakers for 8 years. Over dinner, Ellen finally opened up. I spent 22 years with the FBI, Henry, in the Civil Rights Division, investigating HOA fraud and community abuse. I retired 3 years before we met, thinking I was done. But this world isn't done with me. I stared, my fork frozen midair. She'd taken down operations like Patricia's millions in fraud, cloaked as governance. Patricia wasn't just fighting a former agent. She was fighting the expert. Carl called Patricia in a panic, his voice trembling. I looked her up. She took down the Riverside fraud ring 5 years ago. They got 15 years in prison. Patricia's confidence cracked. What are we dealing with? She asked, her voice shaking. The investigation uncovered $200,000 in fraudulent fines, altered maps, and personal bank accounts filled with HOA money. Neighbors came forward, revealing thousands paid in fake fees. Mrs. Jenkins, 2 streets over, had lost $1,200. The Thompsons paid for non-existent landscaping violations. At 6 a.m., federal agents and police swarmed Patricia's house and the HOA office. Carl was caught trying to flush documents down his toilet. Patricia's face cycled through shock, denial, and terror as agents identified Ellen as their consulting expert. You were FBI this whole time, she stammered. You were building a case. Ellen's response was ice cold. I gave you a chance to stop. You escalated. This is the consequence. Patricia and Carl were arrested, their fake authority exposed. Patricia got 2 years in prison and $150,000 in restitution. Carl received 18 months and 500 hours of community service. The HOA was disbanded by court order. My school reinstated me with back pay, and the complaints were dismissed when the FBI investigated the accusers. The new HOA, led by honest residents, focused on community service, organizing block parties, and maintaining parks. Neighbors recovered thousands in fraudulent fines, rebuilding their lives. Ellen replanted her flower bed with wildflowers, a defiant middle finger to the old HOA. This is our yard, she said, smiling. The story hit the news, exposing suburban HOA fraud nationwide. Ellen consulted on similar cases, helping communities fight back. Our neighborhood became a model of cooperation, proving what happens when people stand up for their rights. Looking back, I realize I didn't just marry a gardener who loves mysteries. I married a hero who spent her career protecting people from bullies like Patricia. The lesson? Know your rights and use them. You don't need to be an FBI agent to fight back, just someone willing to stand up. What would you do if fake enforcers showed up at your door? Have you faced bullies hiding behind fake authority? Share your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about confronting injustice and whether force is ever justified. Your voice matters, so speak up.